Now here we are, it's the final battle of the Divinez Paralactic Clash, and Akina's chance to get revenge at Gabwellius for making his girlfriend, his girlfriend, get amnesia and forgetting him. Honestly, this might be the worst matchup for Heseal, specifically because of the Phantom skill. This skill literally negates critical triggers. I think that Heseal decks literally need to run 8 of them because that's how his divine skill works. In the show, we know that despite this Phantom skill, he chooses in fact to keep all 8 triggers in his deck because that's when Heseal is at its strongest. Now, as a TCG fan, I can say that countering your opponent is a valid strategy, like running Rush decks against Zorga or running Liel against Blind Mayo or Alpharad. But that's for cowards! True TCG fans play the game using their favorite deck and win! We don't lose, baby! Anyways, onto the video. It's turn 1 and Gabwellius is going first. He has a grade 0 aspiring Draco Kid, while Akina is riding Wings of Aspiration so well. Gabwellius goes first, and discarding a card, he rides Fruition Dragon. He doesn't have any skills here, so nothing to change. It's turn 2. It's Akina's turn and he draws. He discards a card and writes Fantesta. He draws a card from Sowell's effect. He then calls a Lifebook Sowell as a rearguard to the left rearguard circle and attacks with Fantesta. Once again though, I do need to reiterate that attacking with your rearguard first usually is a better idea, just in case your opponent gets lucky and pulls a trigger. Now, there's a thought that if you attack and then you get a trigger like a critical, but your opponent guarded your Vanguard attack with some kind of trigger, that the critical trigger goes to waste or something, and will be completely useless. But honestly, I think you should be okay with that. I would rather that you get at least 1 damage than just completely shut off from any damage during that turn when you're trying to rush. That's my opinion, but it doesn't have to be yours, so feel free to work on your own playstyle, and most of the time your playstyle runs on what deck you're playing, so that's fine. Honestly, if you're gonna rush like Akina though, especially with how many cards I know he has in his hand, I don't know why he didn't just call a bunch of grade 1s to just complete the rush. Anyways, he attacks with Fantesta and drive checks. Gabwellius no guards, and Akina doesn't hit a trigger. Gabwellius takes the first damage of the fight, a Reverent Dagger. Then Akina attacks with Lifebook Sowell, to which Gabwellius guards with a critical trigger. Honestly, for now, guarding with a critical trigger is actually quite expensive, and in a deck like Gabwellius's, I was expecting him to guard with something like a Reverent Dagger instead. After all, guarding with cards that can come back from the drop is a far better cry than using these high defensive cards that can be later used to guard much stronger attacks. But even if he didn't have a Reverent Dagger, I don't understand why he didn't use the Oriens in his hand, which I know he does have. But it could be also proven that, he kept the Orient because he wants to rush next turn, which he does. But for me, I feel like using a critical trigger so early is a bit of a waste. But that's my opinion. Turn 3. It's Gabwellius' turn and he draws. He discards a heal trigger and he rides Attainment Dragon. And using its effect, he gets a Crimson Moon to his hand. He immediately uses it and calls a Reverent Dagger from the top 5 cards of his deck. He then calls an Orient from his hand, and with a Soul Blast 1, he can call a Folklore from the top 5 cards of his deck behind Attainment Dragon. Now, putting a card behind your Vanguard usually makes things very difficult for your opponent, because now that you've done that, they need to use more than 1 card to block your attack. They can't just block it with a trigger, just in case you hit a critical trigger or something. So it actually makes it quite tough on them. So this is a great move from Gabwellius. So he attacks with Oriens first and attacks Akina's Vanguard. Akina no guards, getting hit with a Lifebook Sowell as the first damage of the fight. He then attacks with Attainment Dragon, who is also boosted by Folklore, to which Akina no guards again. Gabwellius drive checks, gets nothing. Akina gets hit with the second damage of the fight, a PG. He then attacks with Reverend Dagger, and Akina guards with a critical trigger. Honestly, I believe Now said it best. When you go second, you're getting a later start compared to your opponent, so it's usually best to guard early so that you aren't suffering from taking too much damage too early. Akina just doesn't seem to care, because to be honest, Heseal does work better when he has more damage. I won't personally say that no guarding from Akina was a good thing, but I can't say I would have made the same moves because it's too much damage at the start of the fight. Turn 4. It's Akina's turn, and at 2 damage, he's already falling behind quite badly, especially because he's going second. But he draws. He discards a draw trigger and rides a Censure. With Ventesta's skill, he soul charges 1, and I'm pretty sure it's heseal, and he calls Ventesta to the right side rear guard boosting circle. He then calls Orchides, his new card. With its effect, he discards a save risk from his deck. Now, if you don't know, this effect is BS, because thinning out your deck like this improves your chances of getting more drive checks. And in a deck like heseal, where offense is already abundant, why would he need more? But he puts save risk from the deck to the drop because he wants to call it later with heseal's skill. Honestly, putting save risk in the drop is a good idea, but I personally would have put either Catalyst or Nilberis in there just in case, because I want more offense and drawing at the exact same time. He then moves back his Sowell and calls another Nilberis from his hand to the left side front row and calls a Sowell from his hand to the back row behind his Vanguard. He has decided to call a whole ass field, and he's going full steam ahead. He attacks with Nilberis, boosted by Sowell and Gabwellius, no guards, hitting a Steam Maiden Spiral Cutie. He then attacks with a Censure boosted by Sowell, and Gabwellius guards with a critical trigger and is intercepted by Reverend Dagger. This is a good play by Gabwellius because Reverend Dagger later can call itself back from the drop, meaning that intercepting with it is the best use of its skill. Akina drive checks and hits a critical trigger. He of course gives it to his not yet attacked Orchides, and boosted by Ventesta, the critical trigger and his own effect, it's at 28,000 power. Gabwellius guards this with a heal trigger and an Orleans. Now, for reference, Gabwellius has now gone through 2 heal triggers already. This is huge news for Akina because now we're slowly chipping away at his chances for a miracle. Now the only question is whether Akina can actually last this long in this fight. Let's keep going. Turn 5. The first grade 3 hits the field. It's Gabwellius' turn, and he draws. He discards a Febrile Dragon and rides a Demonic Lord Dragon, Gabwellius Fantome. He then uses another Crimson Moon from his hand and calls Oriens, and using its skill again, he Soul Blasts 1 and calls a Pious Breath Dragon from the top 5 cards in his deck behind the Oriens. And here he uses Pious Breath Dragon's effect, which I know because I saw his soul later in the fight, meaning that he did in fact this time send a card from the top 5 cards of his deck to the drop. Furthermore, he calls a Reverend Dagger from the drop with its own effect, and with his Forbidden Art, he activates his Phantom skill. He binds 1 Crimson Moon from his drop and his front row gets 5,000 power. He boosts with Pious Breath and attacks with Oriens. Because of Pious Breath Dragon's ability, it's at 10,000 power, so when it's boosting, this attack is at 25,000 power, to which Akina guards with a critical trigger and intercepts with Nilberis. He then attacks with Gabwellius Fantome. Using a counterblast, he puts both the Febrile Dragon and the Pious Breath into the soul using Gabwellius' skill, allowing him to call a Febrile Dragon and a Folklore from the drop. Now, the anime doesn't show this, but he uses Pious Breath Dragon's skill to draw another card. Akina no guards this attack, and it's understandable. He's only got 2 cards in his hand, and guarding an 18,000 power attack is a little bit tricky, especially because he's doing 2 drives, and he'd most likely have to use either 3 units from his hand because it doesn't seem like he has a single trigger to use. Gabwellius drive checks. He gets a Pious Breath Dragon and a critical trigger. He gives the critical trigger to Gabwellius Fantome and the 10,000 power to Reverend Dagger. Akina gets 2 damage, his Blitz Order Heavenly Bright, and a Faded King heseal. Attacking with his Reverend Dagger, Akina no guards again. This Reverend Dagger's attack is at a whopping 30,000 because of its own effect, the trigger, and the Phantom skill. Akina gets hit with his second PG of the game in the damage zone. Then, attacking with Febrile Dragon boosted by Folklore, Akina guards his attack with a PG. He retires his Folklore and draws another card. This is, by the way, the 3rd PG that Akina now revealed. This is seriously bad luck. For those who don't know, you can only have 4 PGs in your deck, unless you're a certain deck. But it's so unlucky for you to hit 2 of these in your damage zone. Like, this is some pretty bad luck. Not to mention, he's only got 1 card in his hand compared to Gabwellius' 7. Now, this is bad, Gabwellius knows it, Akina knows it, everybody knows it. But he won't give up, because this much won't break our miracle boy. It's turn 6, and it's Akina's turn. He draws and discards most likely his Rephisto from his hand and rides from the ride deck, Heseal. He then calls Rephisto from the drop using Ascensor's skill, and using Rephisto's skill by counterblasting 1, he adds a Heseal from the top 7 cards in his deck to his hand. They didn't show this in the anime, but it's pretty obvious later. Using the Divine skill, by Soul Blasting, he gets to shuffle back the 3 critical triggers from the drop into the deck, and he gets a 1 extra drive this turn. He first attacks with Orchides boosted by Vantesta. This attack is worth 30,000 because Orchides, this already extremely busted card, also just happens to get 10,000 extra power when you use the Divine skill. What the f***? Gabwellius guards by using a critical trigger and a Reverend Dagger to intercept. Now, Orchides happens to have another effect. Whoa, what a not busted unit. Like, damn, this thing's got so many effects. He puts Orchides into the soul and draws another card. He then attacks with Heseal, and its skill allows him to call a Severus and a Neoberis from the drop. With Severus' skill, he Soul Blasts 1 and gives the front row 5,000 power. Now, was this the correct choice? As you all are aware, Heseal is on average a 5 attack deck, especially if you're at 5 damage. So the reason Akina didn't do that? Well, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure he could have. Like, the cards he ended up discarding was his Rephisto, I'm pretty sure, and he couldn't Soul Blast the Orchides again so that he could thin his deck even more. The only way he could have done something different would have been if he sent something other than Severus to the drop using Orchides' skill like 2 turns ago, but that requires foresight, and only with the benefit of foresight would Akina know that he doesn't need more boosting, he needs more front row attacks. Anyways, he attacks with Heseal and has a triple drive. In this drive check, he gets his last PG. What the f? Did you not shuffle your deck? How are there so many PGs at the top of your deck? He gets a draw trigger, to which he gives Rephisto a 10,000 power increase, and the third check, which Akina is sweating because he knows his own trigger luck, he gets a critical trigger. Gabwellius' skill activates. Gabwellius negates the critical increase, but he gives the 10,000 power to Neoberis. Gabwellius gets hit with his 3rd damage of the fight. Akina then attacks with Rephisto, and this is a calm attack that isn't worth much, you know, it's only 43,000 power. Holy crap, this deck is powerful. But Gabwellius doesn't guard here, and honestly, I don't see much need for him to. He's got the advantage here, and even if Akina does live the next turn, he's gonna be pretty homeless with Gabwellius most likely next turn trying to make Akina use as many cards as possible. Anyways though, Gabwellius gets hit with his 4th damage of the fight, a draw trigger. And from what the hand looks like, I'm assuming he drew another Persona right from the draw trigger. He gives the 10,000 power to Gabwellius Phantom and draws a card. He then attacks with Neoberis, and it's blocked by Gabwellius' perfect guard because Gabwellius apparently didn't block much that turn. But because Gabwellius didn't block much that turn, he still got 5 cards in his hand. Of course he got lucky with the draw trigger, but was this actually the correct move to use the PG this early? Yes, actually, because if you see his hand, he actually doesn't have any other moves other than to use the perfect guard, because all he has else in his hand is 2 Persona rides, another PG, and a critical trigger, and a Pious Breath, so he wouldn't have even had enough to block the next attack. Akina activates Neoberis and Severus' skill. Severus lets him bind the unit and he gets to draw another card. Neoberis lets him Energy Blast 3, draw a card, and look at the top card of the deck, either putting it at the top or the bottom. He puts it at the bottom, meaning there's no trigger at the top, meaning that he doesn't have his Divine skill confirmed. It's turn 7. It's now Gabwellius' turn, and he prays that Akina, the unyielding soul, will finally fall. In his hand, I can see that he's got 2 Persona rides, a PG, a critical trigger, and a Pious Breath Dragon, which makes the next 2 cards he draws kind of impressive. He draws a card and he Persona rides and rides Gabwellius Phantom. He then gets to draw another card and the front row gets 10,000 power. He calls a Pious Breath Dragon, a Folklore, and a Swan Lake all from his hand, which means he just drew a Folklore and a Swan Lake, so damn, that's lucky. Now he activates Pious Breath Dragon skill, and by Soul Blasting 1 again, he sends another card from the top of his deck to the drop. His deck actually thins out very well. He then uses the effect of the Febra, which lets him Soul Blast 2 to call it back from the drop, and then he uses Reverend Dagger's effect from the drop to Energy Blast 3 and call it as a rear guard. He then activates the Phantom skill again, Binding another Crimson Moon, he once again gives the front row 5,000 power. This means that the front row right now has 15,000 power, which is insane. He attacks with Febrile Dragon. Akina looks at the field and knows that if he guards all of the attacks, which he can because goddamn Heseal decks draw like hell and the defense is ridiculous, he won't have any offense next turn. So he no guards, hoping for a miracle. And guess what? He gets a damn critical trigger. Now, what were the chances of this happening? As we know, there are 16 triggers in the deck. We know that he got 2 from the dry check, so that means he's down to 14. Counting the other ones he has in his hand later, I'll show you that he's got a total of 13 if I'm counting correct. A roughly 13 out of 28, meaning roughly 46% chance of him getting this. Nearly 50%? Nah, I'd win, man. Like, I'm going for that. Gabwellius then attacks with 46,000 power and 2 criticals from the Fantome skill boosted by Swan Lake. He counterblasts 1 and puts a Febrile Dragon and a Pious Breath into the soul and calls a Febrile and a Folklore from the drop from what I can see. With the effect of Pious Breath he just put into the soul, he gets to draw another card. Akina guards with an over trigger. So yeah, that's why it was 13 out of 28 just now. Gabwellius dry checks. He gets a Reverend Dagger and a front trigger. He then attacks with Febrile at a whopping 51,000 power, and Akina guards this with a critical trigger, a draw trigger, and a Savorus in his hand. Gabwellius once again retires Folklore and draws another card. He then attacks with Reverend Dagger and Akina guards with a PG. Again, he retires his Folklore and draws another card. It's turn 8, and it's time for the Fated King to hit the field. Akina draws and Persona rides Heseal Vita. He once again calls Orchides, and this time discards Impervious from his deck. He then attacks with Orchides, to which Gabwellius guards with a front trigger. He then boosts with Soel and attacks with Refistor, to which Gabwellius guards with 2 critical triggers. He now attacks with Heseal Vita, boosted by Soel. He then uses Heseal's skill and calls on the drop a Savorus and an Impervious. He then puts the Impervious on top of Refistor, retiring Refistor, but then uses Heseal Vita's skill and putting a Heseal into the soul and calls back Refistor. He doesn't seem to use Refistor's skill and dry checks twice. He gets a Nobia and a heal trigger. He's now at 4 damage and Gabwellius hits his 5th damage of the fight and hits a Pious Breath Dragon. Akina then attacks with Impervious at 40,000 power, and Gabwellius guards with a PG. The reason he does this for the weaker Impervious attack is because in the future right now, Refistor PG negates. Now, Akina attacks with Refistor, who's at a whopping 63,000 power. Now, there's no way Gabwellius can guard this, like this attack is so damn high. Oh wow, he's got a over trigger too, and he also intercepts or guards with a Reverend Dagger. You know what, never mind. Akina ends his turn, binding a Savorus and drawing a card. We can see here that Gabwellius has only 2 cards in his hand, a Persona Ride and a Folklore. He's honestly got a pretty good hand, but considering he has literally no other cards except Swan Lake and his Vanguard on the field, he needs some kind of booster later for the back row, because he can just call back his Febrile Reverend Dagger, but he needs some kind of boosting. It's turn 9. It's Gabwellius' turn, and he Persona rides Gabwellius Fantome. He calls 2 Folklores. So, damn, you're telling me 2 draws, and of course he gets his 3rd and 4th Folklore? But I guess considering how little cards there are left in his deck, I'm not exactly surprised. I'm still surprised, but damn. He then uses the Febrile Dragon and Reverend Dragon skill again, and calls them back. This deck is insanely good at calling back cards over and over and over again. Yes, it's a little boring, I'm not gonna lie, because it's so insanely consistent, but it actually isn't that broken when you actually look at it. Anyways, he then uses the Fantome skill for the 3rd time, and this time, because there are 3 binded Crimson Moons, he gets the 10,000 power increase. Now, does this actually mean he should have binded 2 Crimson Moons faster so that he could have got this 10,000 power increase faster? No, because if he did, he wouldn't have been able to activate it this turn 9. So honestly, Gabwellius Fantome going for the long game is actually the smartest play here. Now, this means that the front row has a 20,000 power increase on top of the Persona Ride. He boosts with Folklore and attacks with Febrile Dragon. This attack, 44,000, to which Akina guards with a heal trigger and a front trigger, is a lot. But it's not as bad as later. Gabwellius retires his Folklore and draws a card. And now, Gabwellius attacks with Gabwellius Fantome. He counterblasts and calls Reverend Dagger and another Folklore. The miracle is coated in a jet black darkness, and heseal falls into that darkness. But it's okay, because the Archangel's wife won't let it happen a second time. Akina guards with Liel Amorta. By putting the two binded Savouresses back on the bottom of the deck, he can PG the Gabwellius attack. Well, damn, okay. Gabwellius noticeably frustrated dry checks and gets a critical trigger and a heal trigger. He heals one, and he gives all of the effects, both the critical increase and the power, to the left side Reverend Dagger. Now, was it a good idea to stack up all the effects on top? In this situation, with how he's reading it, he made the perfect play, because I know most of you would have just put it into two separate rear guards. But here's the reason why. Akina is at 4 damage, and you know you need 2 damage to win. His hand is noticeably quite sizable, but you also know that he's got no PGs left. The Liel was a bit of surprise, but he's got no other PGs, and he's got no more binder to use, meaning he has no way of PGing this next attack. So he's used them all, and so you know when your opponent has no PGs left in their hand, put everything, the attack, the power, the critical, and just either hope he doesn't get anything or that they don't have enough to block. Unfortunately, Gabwellius, even though this Reverend Dagger is at 68,000 power, it's blocked by 2 Lifebook Sewells who bind themselves, and heseal gets an extra 10,000 power until the end of this battle, and then guards with a 10,000 power shield, 5,000, 15,000 because Impervious intercepted, another 10,000, and a 5,000 shield. Insane, actually. He then attacks with his remaining Reverend Dagger, and Akina no guards. He retires his 2 Folklores and draws 2 more cards. It's turn 10, and the final turn of the fight. It's Akina's turn, and with no cards in his hand, he's in a tough situation. So, how can he turn this around? It all starts with a card he's had since the beginning. He draws and calls the ever trustworthy Nobia. With its skill, he looks at the top 3 cards of his deck and calls Refistor. And with Refistor's ability, with another counterblast, he checks the top 7 and gets a heseal to his hand. It's time for the final clash. Akina attacks with Refistor, and it only gets a 5,000 power increase, so this attack is only 15,000 power. Gabwellius casually intercepts this with a Reverend Dagger. He then attacks with Nobia, and using her effect, Soul Blast 1, so this attack is at 20,000 power, and Gabwellius guards with a critical trigger. Akina soars high, and attacks with heseal Vita. Akina uses Vita's skill and calls an Impervious to his left side column and a Lifebook Sewell from the drop. He then calls Refistor from the drop by putting another heseal into the soul. Heseal attacks Gabwellius. Now, for reference, Vita gets 5,000 power for each heseal in the soul. And because this fight's been going on for so long, there are now 3 in the soul. By the way, the 1 extra that he got, when you don't count it, is from the Ventesta's soul charge, which is why Vita's at 28,000 power. Gabwellius PGs this attack. Was it the correct move? Yes, it was the only correct move. Because you have to remember that Gabwellius still has his Phantom skill, meaning he can negate 1 critical trigger. Not only that, but he has only 2 cards left in his hand. One of them is the PG and the other one is the heal trigger he had. He knows Akina is going to put all his faith in getting dry checks and giving them to Refistor, because that's his only way of winning. Akina needs to get 2 damage this turn somehow, and he's got another PG in his hand, meaning he knows that the literal only chance Akina has, literally, is by getting 2 critical triggers. There is no reason he shouldn't have PG'd the Vanguard attack, just in case Akina does actually get 2 critical triggers, but the chances of that are slim. For reference here, the reason I've been keeping track of Akina's deck is because I wanted to keep track of the triggers. He was at 23 at the start of this turn, meaning with Nobia's effect, Refistor's effect, he's at 20 cards in his deck. Also thanks to Vanguard, I know he's got 6 critical triggers in his hand, meaning he's got a 6 out of 20 chance, then a 5 out of 19 chance. Now I'm no math major, but just shouldn't be too hard. Now let me go check. What the f? He's only got an 8% chance? Okay, now what? Akina dry checks. He gets a critical trigger and gives it to Refistor. But of course, Gabwellius negates the critical increase. Akina then checks the second time. He will never stop believing. and he gets another critical trigger. He attacks with Impervious first, and Gabwellius PGs that. He then attacks with a Fistor at 53,000 power and 2 criticals. Gabwellius of course doesn't want to lose. This was the only way he could at least meet his family again. But he has literally only 1 heal trigger to guard with. He's got nothing left. Akina attacks with Refistor and gives the Gabwellius his 2 damage. He gets the Steam Maiden Spiral Cutie and a Gabwellius Phantom. Gabwellius loses. Okay, nah, an 8% chance of winning is actually diabolical, I'm not gonna lie to you. Honestly, these types of fights are my favorite. I love the back and forth. I love it because it always makes me use my brain more, and there's probably things I missed out on, so please tell me in the comments. But honestly, Gabwellius is probably the only deck where playing for an extremely long game is perfect with no drawbacks. Because he never runs out of soul, he never runs out of units to call, and he never even runs out of counterblast to use. And compared to even heseal, he's in a better situation. Akina was very lucky in that final situation, but you do have to realize that he did a lot during this fight that I consider to be perfect. He's a good player, and his deck is built as best as it can, and I think that he does a very good job at being the poster boy for Vanguard. Yes, he's lucky, but that's the kind of this point of Cardfight Vanguard. You do need luck. A drive check should get your heart pumping and get you excited. I'm of course not done with this season, but I personally thought this season had some very fun fights, and while I wish it was longer so we could explore the other fights and the situation in the parallactic zone, I can understand that people's attention spans are definitely dropping, so it's probably difficult to make a long series, but I love these long fights. So thank you, Vanguard, and I hope you all enjoyed the analysis. I'll see you all in another video. Bye everyone!